Manuel, it's so great that you could come visit today here in Los Angeles. I know you've come from near Madrid and you're here for a few days. There are many people that are very interested in uh, about the history of Manuel Rodriguez guitars. And I'm wondering if you could just give a kind of an overview of the 104-year tradition and people involved in Manuel Rodriguez guitars up until the present.
It's my honor, Jeff. And when you told me about this, it was a very interesting a project what you're doing right now about the classical guitar and what you have online. Well, this company is 111 years old. I'm the third generation. My great-grandfather was a gypsy flamenco player, Los Marequi. He was in San Fernando, Cádiz, and he was playing for the Tsar Russia and all the north of Europe. They were making only 5 pesetas. That was like less than $1 those times. So my grandfather had a fishing store in San Fernando, and in the First World War, a big German vessel in the First World War sank, and people were not eating fish because they thought they were poisoned because 1,000 soldiers passed away. So he went bankrupt and started to make guitars for my great-grandfather, the flamenco guitars. So he was making guitars and he went to get more skills in Madrid. As you know in the book, Madrid is the biggest school of the world of guitar making, luthiers. And he worked for Ramirez, and then he worked by himself in Lavapiés in Madrid. And then my dad learned from my grandfather and also worked for Ramirez. Ramirez is the first oldest guitar band in the world, and we're the second oldest guitar band in the world. So from that experience in 1955, as you know, good friend Ted Norman was walking around in Madrid, met my dad, and he said, "What do you do? We need guitar makers in California and LA." So he said, "Come to see us or come to work in LA." And said, "Why not in English? ¿Por qué no?" He said. So he just got married, not knowing any English, $100, a few tools, and went to the States, and we were here for about 16 years. I was born here. So it's my passion to be in my born city here with you.
Well, I connect in that whole story in a small way because in the late 60s, I was a student of Ted Norman. And whenever I needed anything about the guitar, I would go to your family shop on 3rd Street near La Cienega. And it was always the greatest fun of my week, for sure, to come and visit your father and his shop. And I would sit in the back of the shop watching him make the guitars and step by step. And I remember him saying at the time, I asked him, "How many guitars can you make in a year?" And if I'm remembering correctly, he would say 24. So he'd make 2 at a time.
Correct.
And so he could make a total of 12 sets of 2.
That's right.
And as I remember, they were very hard to get because there was always a waiting line for getting one. And I eventually was honored to be able to have one for.
So you know me, a teenager walking around the workshop with a lot of hair at that time and shorts. That's amazing. Small world, isn't it, Jeff?
That's great. So now you eventually moved back to Madrid, and there I know your father continued to make guitars for a very long time. And there was a point at which you expanded to more than just the custom, highest quality concert guitars. And can you talk a little bit about where we are today with that?
Okay.
And so forth.
Well, there was a moment I was making my guitars. I was 18 years old, long hair, and they were not selling. So I was giving English classes in Madrid. I bought my first car, Renault 11 Red, French. And I went all around Europe. I went to France, England, and Belgium. And I got quite enough of orders of my own guitars and more studio models. We were not making those studio models because we didn't have the capacity and also workers. So we were buying these guitars from Valencia makers. That was 1980s. And my dad, I brought some order with my car. My dad saw so many orders, so he bought me a big truck. And that truck will fit 5,000 guitars. It was like the online sales at that time. Yellow Page, 5,000 guitars at that time in the truck. And it was like the online sales at that time. Yellow Pages and maps and knocking doors. Here I am. Here's the guitars. What guitar do you want? It was a fantastic adventure because going to see all these stores with my long hippie hair, 18 years old, they still remember me those days. And for me, it was a wonderful experience of 6 years traveling all around Europe, small cities. And from that experience, what we have now today is really amazing. Excuse me. Really amazing.
When I was able to visit your factory north of Madrid, I think it's near Toledo, is that
That's
correct?
south of Madrid, yes. Toledo south, yeah.
I see.
Mhm.
So my map got
No worries.
Fortunately, we had transportation taken care of.
Yes.
I was completely blown away by how your family has been able to create the capacity to make mini guitars, but still retain the quality and the precision that we would like, even in a very beginning student guitar. It's still basically, it seemed to me, it has all the elements of wisdom and construction that have been transferred forward in time. And I know that there are machines that, for example, glue the top to the bottom and sides
Correct.
with a computer control of temperature and pressure and so forth. And can you discuss a little bit of how you have been able to automate some parts of guitar making? I know some parts will always be hand done.
Correct. Well, nowadays kids need to play decent instruments, so we have to make the same quality instrument for that budget price, because mama and daddy doesn't want to spend $5,000; they want to spend $300. So we got the techniques nowadays to make that $300 guitar the same Spanish heel when we glue the back, sides, and neck at the same time. So, and it's always hand involvement, because we're talking about 80% is handmade, because we glue the binding with a string, as you saw. We sand the guitars by hand. It's all spray by hand. So in the way that we've done it is to make it more productive, that small machines can help us cut margins and time. But, you know, it's very important for a kid that's starting to play a guitar to have a decent guitar. If he doesn't have a good guitar, he won't play. And we need musicians in this world. Nowadays, we have the China production making a lot of guitars, but maybe they last 1 month. And this musician doesn't have a good instrument to continue. So we're losing musicians. And our battle nowadays, as you know, is all about PlayStations, tablets, iPhones, that kids are not playing musical instruments. So our battle is to make the best guitar we can for the best price to get that musician dignified with a good instrument to continue a legacy of playing a guitar for a long time. That's what we need to get to the market.
I know that in my own education for an involvement in music, from day one, it was always emphasized to me, get the finest guitar, get the finest strings, get the finest music editions.
Correct.
And performance editions that you can. And in every respect, and today it's gone further than that, because you need, today's musician needs notation software. Get good notation software. Have good headphones. Have a good microphone if you're recording, or good cameras for your videos, because everybody is doing that today. But the root of it, the beginning part of it, is the guitar. And that's where you guys come in, because I, as a guitar teacher, I've so often been in the position of someone may have rented a guitar for a few months, and they say, now I want to buy one. I really don't like to say, well, the minimum you have to spend is $2,000. Can you find something that is less than that, that will be dignified, and that, as you say, will not turn off the natural musicality and creativity of that person, because the guitar is so limiting?
Correct. Nowadays, we can make a guitar for $800, $1,000, all solid back and sides, and really have a very, very decent guitar for a long career. And we can make that nowadays in Spain. As you know, as we spoke at NAMM show, everything is made in Spain right now. Before, with the euro so expensive and the dollar so weak, it was very tough for us to make guitars, the low-price guitars. So China came on board. But we tried to avoid that, making everything in Spain. So right now we create about 50 new jobs, and we're making that type of instruments for future musicians to say, made in Spain, with the second oldest brand, and with very good quality woods, because woods is very important also, not only the hand involvement, but woods is our gold. And as we have, I'm very fortunate to have woods of my grandfather from 1910s or 1920s of Brazilian rosewood. That's my gold. Not money, wood. Because we make people happy with guitars. And a guitar is like a beautiful woman. Has to have personality, has to sound, and everyone sounds different, like personalities of the human being. So that woods that we have from my grandfathers and my fathers is a legacy. I have to make the best guitars I can for those people to continue to play music and make that guitar live for many, many more years.
So one of the things I'm wondering, I have a general sense of this, is, for example, someone in the United States, let's say that they're considering buying a good student guitar for, say, $800 to $1,200, for example. I know you do a lot of work distributing your instruments. Can people find Manuel Rodriguez guitars in many different places? Or how does one go about at least considering one of your guitars as something that they may wish to purchase?
Well, we have 3 companies here, excuse me, in the U.S. KMC sells to the small mama papa stores, I would say about 6,000 stores. We just started with them this past NAMM show. We have Guitar Center that they buy more of the low price ones, and Sam Ash buys also more expensive ones. So we have a very huge network here in the U.S. I was born in this country, so I'm trying to bring the best passion instruments made in Spain to my own country, so kids can play decent instruments.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what about in Europe? For someone who is on the continent of Europe or in England, are there also places where you guys distribute your instruments so people can check
I'm very fortunate that in all my career in this past 40 years, since I was in kindergarten, I used to go to my dad's shop and smell the varnish and smell the wood. I started to really get this wonderful to make guitars when I was 11 years old. So from 11 years old to now I'm 53, with all my career and experiences and knowledges and bad experiences and good experiences, we've reached now to 122 countries.
Wow.
So that's traveling, as you know, spreading the passion of my brand, telling all the experiences. As you know in the book, there's many stories what we had with the truck and what we have nowadays. So it's all about passion and get the best guitars to those countries. And people, when they want to find a good guitar, has to be Spain. Spain is where the guitar was invented, where you can see the flamenco passion, like gospel, where you can get the best craftsmanship is Spain. All the rest, they copy us. Or the history. For example, steel string guitars or electrical guitars, they came from Spain. Christopher Columbus came to the U.S., to the States, with a viola. And that's how Martin started to make guitars. And then Fender came on, or Gibson. But Spain is the history and the roots. I mean, we invented submarine, and we invented I don't remember now, but Spain is a very invented country of technologies. But the guitar is, as I said, the word Spanish guitar has to be Spain.
Wonderful. So I thought we have one of your father's guitars here, and this is a flamenco guitar. I'm going to turn around and get it. And I thought this is a wonderful, beautiful instrument.
Thank you.
I have to tell you that I may not return it at least for a while, because I would really like to sit down.
The owner's here in this room right now.
I know, and I'm trying to consider how I can make a deal about this. This happens to be a very charismatic instrument, and for so many reasons. But I thought it might be great to just have you perhaps bring your view of the instrument as far as the woods, for example, first. Could you
Sure.
look at this and, and show the different woods for the neck and the fretboard?
If you don't mind, first I must explain, I'm not the best, I'm not the worst guitar maker. All the guitar makers in the world have their own personality, and they try to make the best instruments. My dad taught me with woods, to make the best guitar you can with the best bracing patterns or dryness of the wood or grain. So each country has different personalities. If you make a guitar in Germany, it's different sounding than England or Spain. It depends on the weather, your attitude, if you slept well that day. There's many environments when you make a guitar. So on this guitar, for example, this is cedar top from 1920. So my dad taught me, my grandfather taught me that the more narrow the grain is, the better the guitar sounds. That means that the tree was slow growth. And we can see the weather and that grain. If it's been winters very dry, or dry summers, or wet or very wet winters, the tree grows more. Or even the altitude. The higher, the better. Slow growth is better than very quick growth. When we see wide grains for the low price guitars, when it's more for expensive guitars, it has to be very, very dense.
So what that brings to mind is just a very basic question, which it never occurred to me before. So when you look at the grain and I see a line of dark, and then I see a lighter line, and then another line of dark, between the two dark lines, does that represent a season of growth, a year of growth?
Exactly, 1 year of growth. So we're talking about 80 years of growth on this top.
So this is 80 years.
It's book matched, so it's two pieces.
So these two pieces were from the same tree?
Always has to be the same tree.
Why is that?
Well, because we're talking of stiffness. Same tree. We cannot mix trees. It won't work. It's like a human brain that you're cutting the brain in half. This is the heart of the instrument.
So this is really two pieces that are
Correct.
just joined. I can't see.
You can't see the joints because it's very well done.
Yeah, it's almost invisible.
Exactly.
I see.
But that's how we select the tops, by stiffness. Spruce tops always sound better for classical guitars. Look at the Stradivarius violins. They last for 300 years and they still sound there. And there's no cracks because they have the string tail down here. So cedar tops, from my perspective, my opinion, with 80 or 90 years, they start to die, they start to crack because very soft.
I see.
Spruce is very stiffness, so it lasts longer. And spruce at the beginning doesn't sound so bright. It sounds with the time being. Cedar sounds very quickly, very, very bright, but it starts to die with the time being.
I see.
So when we do the bracing patterns on the spruce top, we use cedar bracing pattern inside. And when we use cedar tops, we use inside spruce bracing patterns. So we mix the wood that way to get the bass and trebles very, very even. That's our small secrets.
Now, so this top, would you happen to know, like, did this tree grow in North America? Did it grow in Europe? Do you have any?
This cedar is from Canada, so it's more from Seattle up to the Rocky Mountains. So that's the best cedar wood. Victoria Island is the best cedar of the world. Why? Because there's not so much snow there. It's very wet, and the trees grow very slow.
I see.
And spruce from Mittenwald, Germany, is the best spruce in the world. The best violins are made from that wood in Mittenwald, in the Black Forest in Germany, near with Austria. Another aspect of each guitar is also the bracing patterns. Each guitar maker has different bracing patterns. It's from their own school. So they just investigate or test. My father, I remember he was trying with graphite and spruce, like a sandwich, always innovating. My dad taught me to be innovating all the time. I'm innovating new guitars. I call them café con leche, coffee with milk. How do I say that? I'm mixing cedar with spruce, for example, to get better trebles and basses. I'm using natural varnish. I'm a very sustainable company. I'm trying to use ecological varnish, ecological woods. We make as you've been there in our workshop, we make guitar with sun power. So we have to put our small seed for next generations and keep our forests and keep our clean air for the future. So I'm very sensitive about this.
I'm looking at. I'm kind of mesmerized by the rosette and the design here, and I watched your dad make these from little tiny sticks of wood that he would bundle together, and then they were cut laterally. But in reading in the book, I had no idea what an immense amount of craftsmanship goes into actually getting these in there. And what I was reading earlier today before you came by was that sometimes he would be working on one part of it for hours and hours, and something would crack or break, and he would have to redo the whole thing.
Exactly. I mean, it's only part of the beauty of the guitar. It doesn't affect the sound. Same like the binding. We glue that with string. There's no machine. Even when you're in a workshop, the lowest price is still with string. So there's so much hand involvement, and each guitar has a different design. There's not, I mean, my dad's guitar, they're all different. So he was making this different, each one.
I was reading a while back about someone did a very nice book on the history of the Stradivarius violin. And I didn't realize this, but what you're saying reminds me of Stradivarius, because every violin he made, he was experimenting. He had all kinds of differences in the arch, in the length of the neck, and every aspect of it. So he wasn't making something like he thought, I'm going to make a Stradivarius today. Stradivarius himself was an amazing empirical scientist and artist to be able to explore all different ways that the instrument could be made. So when you're telling me about this family tradition, it does fit into the
makes sense.
History of stuff.
It makes sense, exactly. Do you remember the book about the marble bridge?
Yes, of course. I know a lot.
I mean, we're trying. I mean, this in the classical guitar world is very conservative. When you start to do something new, it looks like, uh-oh, we're not going to get involved with this. But the marble bridge, it's that you move each saddle, so you get the perfect tuning, especially on the third string. As you know, it's very tough to tune. But we do it. We're very special customers. People don't like it sometimes because you have to have that manual way of moving it. Electrical guitars has it. Same concept, but with nylon strings.
Well, I know from directly and also from the book that intonation, good intonation, is a prime concern to everyone who plays. And there are a lot of things that go into it, but that I think most of the guitar players can know, or if they don't know, they can look and see how the bass strings have to be higher.
Correct.
Because their periodicity of motion is greater, and that higher bass string means that when you press it down, it has a further distance to go. Therefore, when you press it down, it's going to tend to be sharp because it adds tension when you press the string down. And when you add tension, the pitch goes up. So there's an inherent pitch differential from the first string to the sixth.
Correct.
And I know that the mobile bridge is probably the ultimate way of compensating for that. And if someone changes the kind of strings that they're using or wants to experiment with the thicker or thinner one, gauges, then that gives them a
compensation.
That really is excellent and important for the intonation.
That's right. Especially the fourth and third string. That those are the most both, from my point of view, difficult strings to tune.
Yes. For me, it's always been three for a lot of reasons. So what is the fingerboard made of?
Well, this is ebony fingerboard. This piece of wood takes 100 years. It's the most dense wood in the world. It doesn't float. It's so heavy. So the more dark, the more old. When you see a fingerboard a little bit more white, it's because the tree is not really old. They're cutting too green, too young. And ebony is disappearing. I mean, we have a project with Bob Taylor in Cameroon. I'm working with them to keep the balance of ebony for the future. So they're planting ebony for next generations.
Fantastic. And what are the sides and back the same on this?
This is cypress from 1930 from Aranjuez. Aranjuez is a gardens south of Madrid, near Toledo. And these are royal gardens from the kings of Spain. And when a tree falls down, the guard of the park calls us and we get the wood, because you can't get this wood. It's called cypress real. It's a very thick tree, and it's very difficult to get. And the royal gardens in Spain has these trees, and you cannot cut them. It has to be by natural. When there's a storm, we just look in the sky. Let's see if a tree falls down, and we go and get it to make these guitars. So this is from Aranjuez. Like Concerto Aranjuez Gardens has the best cypress for flamenco guitars.
My goodness. And what is the wood of the neck?
This is Honduras cedar from Honduras. It's the best cedar we can get there. In San Pedro Sula, and that area is the best forest. And then we have the heels with Indian rosewood. These are ebony pegs for flamenco, and Indian rosewood bridge. So it's all tropical forest except cypress, and it's in the top. But the neck and the ebony comes from the tropical forest. Yeah.
So what do you do? Of course, this guitar was made in 1979,
Mm-hmm.
and these were expensive woods then,
Yes.
let alone the very careful selection that your family would have
Correct.
done. Today, it would be, I would guess, a significant investment just to have the woods for this guitar, if you could be so lucky as to find them.
Difficult to get the cypress anymore. Very difficult. Nowadays, we have to use 3 or 4 pieces, not one set, because the trees are too small.
I see. So they've all been harvested.
Exactly. So the value of this guitar is about 3 times more or 4 times more because you cannot get these sets, and with that type of grain. So when you buy a guitar, it's not only the investment of the guitar, it's the wood. So don't sell those guitars because they're going to be more and more expensive.
So I was going to, one of the things that we can address a little bit today
Sure.
with the flamenco guitar is I was just going to share, and maybe we can discuss some of the things that someone who's going to purchase a guitar should look for and look at. I would say one thing that is a long time checker out of guitars for myself and for many others. I always recommend to my students to say there are three affirmatives that you need. You have to like it. The student has to really like it and love it and feel a personal connection, regardless of all the externals or the price. The teacher needs to approve it, presuming the teacher knows stuff. And if you know a guitar maker or excellent experienced guitar craftsman, just like if someone is going to buy a car, you need to have someone who is a pro look at all the things in structure, maybe put a mirror in on the inside and look at the interior, and to check things out so that you know that. And if you get 3 yeses, then that's a possible yes for purchasing it.
Let me tell you one more 4th option. Jeff, a guitar is like a second wife. And you have to play it. And you have to feel in love. You know, you're grabbing the guitar. You're making love with it when you're playing it. So if you get that personal touch, like when you met your wife or your girlfriend, that's your guitar. And the only way to do that is playing many guitars. And as you know, not any guitar sounds the same. They're all different. So from my perspective, I respect your spectrum, what you're telling us, but I think one of the best, really deep soul is when you grab the guitar and you get that really sound that you're looking for. I said before, we cannot reach all the taste of sounds for everyone because we have our own taste for other people. We cannot make the guitars for everyone. We cannot be the best guitar maker for everyone. It's impossible. We only can reach some specific type of people.
Absolutely.
Because each guitar maker has different designs, black and white. I like to make them very exotic, with exotic woods, because my personality is like a beautiful woman, the guitar, the shape, the sound, and the beauty. Other guitar makers like to make them black and brown. I respect. When I give my clinics with Guitar Festival, there's many guitar makers, the first thing I said, hey guys, we're both going to learn. I'll tell my knowledge and you tell me your knowledge and we all grow here.
Well, I completely agree with that sense of connection. And it is really interesting that you kind of know very quickly. But at the same time, I would say that you want to go through that emotional intuitive process that is the most important one, and that has to be there. And then at the same time, add some objectivity to it.
Correct. I agree.
So part of the there are a couple of very objective things that are very simple, and I thought maybe we could share that with this.
Of course. Thank you.
So first, you take the guitar and you feel its weight and balance, and that's an intuitive thing. And one of the first things that I look for is always I sight from the top here, looking straight down.
The neck angle, yes.
And to make sure that the neck is as straight as possible. This is about as straight as the neck can be, particularly with its age. Sometimes, because of the pull of the strings, there'll be a concave bend there, and that will probably, if it's enough, that will result in buzzes on the strings. So when you have, there's a lot of causes of buzzes, and sometimes it takes a good Sherlock Holmes investigation is to figure out what's
Sure.
causing them.
Sure.
It can be a lot of things. But if it is in the curvature of the neck, that is not something that is without solution, but it's a major solution as far as taking the frets out, replaning the neck or sanding it.
Jeff, there's always a small compensation there on all the guitars. Always.
Yes.
People think, no, it has to be straight like steel string guitars. No. On classical guitars, the tension of the strings is 46 kilograms. And you have to have a very small compensation between the 12 frets and the 6th fret. Very small. Not so much because it will buzz. But all classical guitars with that tune instrument, you have a small curve there. Always.
Absolutely.
Any brand.
A small one.
A small one, of course.
Another thing that's good to do is just to feel with your hand on the soundboard all the way through. And this one happens to be remarkably flat. There will be some, you can feel in some places the sense of where some of the support structures are underneath. If it's extreme, that's something that you should consider as a possibility. But a good guitar will have quite straight with a slight concavity, as you were mentioning.
Yes.
And this should be fairly flat.
Absolutely.
Then the next thing that I think is good to do is to just do a quick test. We'll just do a tiny bit of it. It would be much more extensive. And so one of the things that I will just do is I'll first play just this open E string for a sec. And I don't know to what extent our recording will reflect that, but this guitar has this wonderful sustain quality. The tone, as Ted Norman would say, there's a great elongation just of the open E. Now, you can test each string individually by damping the other strings. So if I dampen these strings, I can hear that string by itself. And then what happens is strings are extremely important.
Yes.
And they're probably underrated because sometimes a guitar doesn't sound right, and if you find the right strings for it, it can sound magnificently better. Because the guitar is actually two coupled sounds acoustic systems. The body of the guitar is a passive system, and the strings are the dynamic system, and the player is that one who puts the energy into the string. But the string needs to be true, the frets need to be true in order for the guitar to function at its best. So I listen to this open E, and then I'm going to play the harmonic at the 12th fret. You can easily get, we won't do this today, but you can get a digital tuner. It should read out not only the name of the pitch, but the differential in cents. 1 cent acoustically is 1/100th of a half tone or a semitone. And if you have the open E, let's say 110, I don't remember the exact frequency, sorry, but the, no, that would be an A. This octave harmonic should be exactly double that. There should be almost no differentiation. And then the next step is to just take that E and play it this way. And you can hear very readily that the open E, the harmonic E, and the fretted E are absolutely identical. And you do that with all 6 of the strings. If there's a problem with the intonation, it will tend to show up right there.
Interesting.
Now, sometimes the problem with the intonation will have nothing to do with the guitar. It will be the string. So, for example, if this string, the guitar is responding. It's very happy to hear this E, and all the other strings are sympathetically vibrating with it that have those overtones in it. The harmonic E, the color and the richness of it come with the participation of the body of the guitar. But if that's not in tune, the string is bad. So you have to be careful that you're not mixing the judgment of the strings versus the judgment of the guitar.
Wow. Interesting.
That's very important. So even in the highest quality strings, once you string them up and they get settled, it's important to test the clarity and the pitch of the strings, and you can do a chromatic scale of at least 12 notes on each one, and sometimes one string will be, the frets are good, the fret system is good, but the string itself has some problems. It is a miraculous bit of technology, these strings. I haven't ever thought about it that deeply, but recently I have been. And the idea that you can have a material that you stretch under such pressure, how can it be that they can stretch the string under that pressure and the string retains its diameter almost to perfection? So you'll find some notes that will be a little sharp or a little flat. If it's a little sharp, it means that from the fretted note to this part that's sounding, there's part of the string that's a little thin. And so therefore the pitch goes up a little bit. If it's very close, the finger can do a little bit of compensation if your ear is telling you the right information. So that's a few of the basics of just looking at the instrument. The other thing that's important to do is to just feel how the neck feels to your hand. And some necks are too rounded, and that creates a problem. I've always found that you say that all guitars aren't made for everyone. It so happens that the Manuel Rodriguez guitars, the way the neck is made, makes my hand very happy to play it.
Yeah, we have that comment worldwide that we make very comfortable necks for many different hands. I know from other makers they're too round or too heavy. I mean, the more light is the guitar, the better it sounds. It's very important the weight of the instrument. So it has to be very light to get that bright sound.
So one test of the neck is you can just take a few chords. And it should feel comfortable to do bar chords in various places. This is a little bit out of tune, and I'm not going to do too much more in tuning these
pegs. Yeah.
These pegs. These are the best pegs I've ever used. I do have a flamenco guitar, and the pegs are much more problematic, and my lute is even tougher, and plus there's 19 strings on it. So that creates
another challenge. Yeah.
That's a challenge. Yes. So the other thing is just I'll make one other comment on this, and what is important, and I'm sure this is true of flamenco guitarists, because, well, flamenco guitarist, which I am not, has a huge palette of timbre and color that they use all throughout, of all kinds, from highly percussive to all kinds of nuances. And if the guitar is heavy and leaden, then you're going to have a very narrow and kind of dark range. And so you want to be able to just take a little bit of a look at what is the range of sound that you make. So for example, years ago I noticed when Julian Bream played, he would sometimes play his high notes right up just behind the 19th fret.
Wow.
And it just makes a beautiful sound. But then if you go to the middle of the sound hole, so on one note, you can get 50 different sounds.
That's true.
And you need to explore that on a lot of different notes. It's a good thing to do. Now, very few guitars will have this amazing immediate range of sound.
Thank you.
But it should have a good range so that you have a palette. And that's something that a fine guitar will be very, very good for. The string is also very important.
Of course.
Because the string, the string has overtones high frequency overtones that the body of the guitar does not have. So you need to have a string that has the higher partials that combine with the instrument. That together, it is really a collaboration between the strings and the guitar. But if you've ever heard a string without a guitar, you realize you better have a guitar.
Yeah. I
A string
agree.
without a guitar is
I agree.
almost nothing.
Yeah.
So those are a few things that
Very interesting.
that are part of looking at a guitar. I also would say to those who have the opportunity, particularly if someone is considering a very expensive guitar, let's say in the thousands of dollars or many thousands of dollars, you would want to have a fine musician friend listen to it from a distance.
Of course.
Because some guitars sound great to the player, but when you get into a hall, the sound disappears in ways that are hard to figure that they would. So you need to have two people look at it in a hall up close, and then the person who may buy it should sit in the back of a big room. If you don't have a hall, you have a big living room.
Sure.
So those are things that you can kind of consider, as well as making some recordings, see how it records. This guitar I know would sound great in a hall. It would sound wonderful with recording because it has this amazing palette of sounds. So those are all things that can be combined together. And then one thing that we didn't have a chance to do, maybe we get a chance another time you come to LA, which is to have two classical guitars.
Okay, good.
Because one of the things that's nice to do is to have them right there. And so you take, for instance, something, a little flamenco riff of a few notes.
Beautiful.
And then you take that and you try the second guitar. What you were saying earlier completely hits home, that every guitar is different. Even guitars from the same tree and the same maker, it is impossible to have two guitars sound the same. And that's where the mystery and the art and the luthier's art comes in.
Exactly.
They don't need to sound all the same. I'm actually happy that that's the case.
Yes.
It would be
Different tastes, of course.
It's not like, gee, this iPhone is
exactly. This is
pretty much like the other one.
This is a movement guitar. It's wood from God's creation, and as you see, when you go to the forest, for example, and you find Brazilian rosewood maybe in 100 square kilometers in Brazil, but you see one tree that it's perfect for a guitar. All the rest doesn't fit. Yeah. So we're using the best woods in the world to make this instrument sound as it sounds. Not me, all the guitar makers.
Yes. Well, that's something that comes through so nicely in Manuel Rodriguez's book, is that there is a kind of a collective artistic and as well as a kind of a scientific or empirical intent among serious guitar makers to always make the best that they can, best materials, the best construction. And what I'm happy to hear about that you guys are doing is that you're taking the high tradition and you're using that to inform making a good student guitars.
Correct.
And then people can then go forward from that.
Yeah, we still make the $20,000 guitars that I am involved with my brother Norman, and that's still a market there. But to reach so many budgets and taste, and to sell to 122 countries, you have about 45 different models on classical, flamenco, cutaways, bass guitars. So if you come now again, you were there about 7 years ago, 8 years ago at least, I think.
It was about seven
years.
Yeah.
You will see a big difference now because we have more luthiers there, better equipment, and all sustainable woods. I mean, even our offices, the wood is sustainable, the roof is sustainable. We extend more our sun power. All the dust that we use, we heat the building. It's called biomass. So we try to be the most sustainable possible we can.
Well, that is fantastic.
Plus, as I told you before, I was with the mayor of LA a few hours ago before coming here. And we gave 2 guitars signed with my great friend Pierre Lande, my uncle here in LA. And we gave these guitars for homeless people in LA.
Wow.
I said before, I don't have $100,000, but I have hands to make guitars to help people.
Well, that's where for what one of the things that I'm doing, like for example, in us making this video and then sharing it to groups of guitarists from around the world, I think that I'm hoping that people will be able to look at what we're discussing and maybe get some information and some inspiration, because in reality, buying a new guitar is one of the really great experiences for all of us.
Yes.
And having a new one is great. And so doing that well with good information, yet still being informed by the heart and how you feel about what you're doing, but also having information that you should have is really great. So I think I'll be sure to also put a link to your company's website.
Yes, please. RodriguezGuitars.es, yeah.
And so that means that people who are looking at this, who may want to look at the models and look at this, will have great access. That's something that we didn't have in the past, and so that's a way that things can be communicated.
Thank you. Yeah, there's the 3 words that we make in our instruments: rich in sound, history, and beauty. And every single of our guitar makers have that in their head every day we're in the workshop. We keep them motivated. They're not making the same thing all the time. They're moving around the workshop. So because they're doing a piece of art, you know. And to make a guitar, you have to have passion. If not, it won't sound the same.
Yeah. I can say that to make a piece of music, if you're a player, you have to have passion.
Correct.
We have a lot of mechanical and engineering perfection all around us.
That's right.
If you just buy a can of Coke, there's a lot of technology in that.
Yeah.
But today in the world, what musicians and musicians are co-collaborators with the people who make the instruments and the people who make the strings and so forth. And so I think that, you know, my sense is that as we all kind of go ahead with the adventure of doing these things, that a lot of good is happening for a lot of people. It's hard to measure. I know with your dad makes a guitar or you guys make a guitar and it goes into someone's home and someone's life. It's a living creative entity, and the people have that and they share that. And even over decades and great amounts of time, those connections are things that are sustaining in pretty difficult times for a lot of people, a lot of economies and countries and societies. There's so many difficult things. I am so pleased and honored that you could come by here and share some time.
My pleasure, Jeff. I'm so honored that you're doing this. We need to spread the what's about guitars. There's not so much information out there. What you're doing is very important for us. You're explaining what a guitar is, the woods. So we're like Disneyland of the guitar players. We invite people to come to see our workshop, schools, world leaders, musicians, and they enjoy like a Disneyland because what they play, they see how it's made. And when they finish seeing that guitars, how they're made, they value more what they're playing.
Yes.
I'm with the King of Spain, and they call me, and I give a guitar as a symbol of Spain to all these people that come to Spain. I said, look, music inspires wisdom. Please support music in your country. Guitar, piano, violin, whatever. Kids needs to play music because it inspires their mathematics and their brain, and they're more wise people, intelligence. That's my message. And I thank you for this invitation. Hope we can do more things together.
I think we shall. And again, thanks, and we shall continue.
Thank you, Jeff.